Okay, welcome back to another episode of California MBA's Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion podcast. I am your host, Shashank Shekhar. I'm the founder and CEO of Instamortgage, and this podcast is brought to you by Prime Lending. And today I'm super excited about someone in the studio here, virtual studio, where I have Jim Albertelli with me. He is the CEO of Voxtur. And there are several things that he and I went through in the pre-recording call that I think is extremely critical, especially from the diversity, equity, and inclusion, which is what this podcast is all about. So, welcome to the show, Jim.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me. Good to be here.
Sure, of course. Before we get into some of the things that I was saying that I really want to get into on how some of these new policies are going to have hopefully a positive impact on diversity and inclusion. Tell us about a story that you were telling me about a borrower reaching out to you about an appraisal bias, and how did you resolve it? Because we hear about appraisal biases all the time, but I rarely hear about the issue being resolved. Is because yes, there is, but we don't know how to fix it. It seems everything is fine. So walk us through that story on what really happened and what did you do about it?
Yeah, so it's I'm pretty easy to find as CEO of Voxtur. And Voxtur is a data company that provides really the complete physical asset underwrite. So think about it like this: we're in the valuation space, the condition space, the title space, the tax space, and Voxtur has a database that can address all of those needs in mortgage lending. And I'm also very, I'm on LinkedIn, and it's Albertelli, and there aren't too many of us, so I'm easy to find. So a borrower named Deborah Washington out of the state of Florida reached out and said, hey, I'm thinking about filing a complaint and this mortgage against this mortgage lender, and your company was the one that facilitated the valuation. So Voxtur also has an AMC, so we sometimes connect lenders with appraisers, right? And this was an FHA loan. And so, she said, look, I'm looking around and my properties are, the properties around me are valued at more over $10,000 more than my appraisal came in. And she said, and I wasn't there. My husband, who had a medical condition, he had recently had a stroke, was there. So he couldn't really talk about the property intelligently when the appraiser came over. And she goes, and I think, I think I've been wronged in this case. And she wrote me a nice message in LinkedIn. And like I do, I respond to my LinkedIn request. And so I responded to her and I said, hey, Deborah, tell me more about your property. Where's your address, et cetera. And rather than going right away back to the lender or using a sophisticated tool, first I wanted to see what would consumers see out there, right? Because it's important to understand the paradigm. What's their frame of reference? So what I did is I reached out, I looked at several different websites and triangulated on a value, and I looked at it and said, I think she has something here. Like, this is material, and I can certainly understand her frustration. The average age of an appraiser is in their mid 60s, around 65, and they're generally, white males. Okay, so not to say that that there is an overt bias or they're intentionally being biased, but if they go into a community of color, having a little more sensitivity about it, having at least their guard up to say, when there's a subjective value, and part of appraisal is subjective, is being able to give the benefit of the doubt to the homeowner, understanding what we're trying to accomplish here in homeownership, and really trying to bring equality and wealth building to disadvantaged populations, right? A group of society that hasn't had all the benefit and opportunities, and we can close some of that wealth gap, and that's so important for us to do. So I did that. I took a look at it. I saw what she saw, and I went back and I had the appraiser. We appealed the appraised value. They made a small movement, but not sufficient. It was enough to get the loan done. But when I had another conversation with her, she decided to pass, and we looked at it and said, look, if it's $8,000 in origination fees and expenses, and you're only going to get $2,000 out of it, it just didn't seem meaningful enough for the rate change and for the increase in payment. But it was that whole process that I thought a couple things were missing. One, more transparency around the subjective nature, like eliminating more and more the subjective nature of it, given that it's a population it's a group that is aging out, that may have some inherent biases. And A lot of times, unfortunately, the human animal may get a little bit more conditioned to a certain position with age. So this may not be a good thing, right? And so I wanted to really do that. And the second thing I noticed was the educational process, like the conversation and talk from this particular lender. I'm not going to name who it was, but the fact that they didn't give her, here are the objective factors, and here are some of the subjective that could have improved, your value. And unfortunately, with an FHA loan, like many of your clients know, or many of the listeners, once you get that appraisal number, if you move and try to apply somewhere else for an FHA loan, it sticks
You
with you.
can't change.
You
Yeah.
can't do it. You
Yep.
can't change it, right? All you can do is appeal to that same individual. So right away, I thought two things. I thought, one, wouldn't it be nice to have an appraisal, some kind of appellate process where you could get another appraiser to look at it? Wouldn't that be something that'd be nice to have? Two, wouldn't it be great to have a little more education on what are the objective and subjective things? What are some subjective things that are allowed for in an appraisal, where they can then adjust your value up or down so that consumers could be prepared for those things? Maybe there's some simple things that she could have done to make her property a little more appealable when the person came. Maybe not, but maybe there is. So I think there is a communication component that could have been improved upon. I think that there is an appellate process that needs to be in place. And then the third piece of it is the data. Having access to more information that's unbiased to allow for someone to get a better value. And I think we're going to have to address, and FHA is the starting place for many home buyers,
Yes.
and a large part of the population. So to me, it seems like FHA needs to be out ahead of some of these initiatives, to use more data, to look at their appraisal process and the appellate nature of it, to require a little more disclosure, I'd say, to consumers so they're better educated. At the end of the day, I picked up the tab on her appraisal because I appreciated our conversation back and forth, even though it wasn't our responsibility at Voxtur to do it. I just thought it was the right thing to do, and I thought that her engagement in the process was something where I learned about some things we could do better, and so I think we need to do that. So communication and some education, some unbiased data, and a slight process improvement could all help some minority home buyers in this regard.
Yeah, sounds like utopia where we sit right now if we can combine all those four. But we are making progress, and
Certainly.
people like you are definitely helping move that conversation forward. Now let's continue with appraisal for a few more seconds, because I really want to talk to you about title as well. But so we heard Federal Housing Finance Agency talk about late last year, early this year, is that minority home ownership is, of course, one of their biggest goals
Yes.
moving forward. And some of the changes they made to appraisals seems promising, and I want your take on a few of those things. They are allowing more desktop appraisals for purchase transactions. Also, you have a product called Database Box Appraisals. I understand that I want to hear more about.
Sure.
But really, I want to hear more about the fact is that how can GSEs, how can FHA do more about doing less in-person appraisals, going inside the houses of people, and that's having that, as you said, subconscious biases kind of creep into the valuation and the report, and more of using automation, more of using technology, more of using a huge amount of data that you already have probably on every home in the United States
Correct.
already. So talk to us about some of those things that you are doing at Voxtur, what FHFA is doing, and what they can be doing, or what companies like you could be doing to hopefully minimize some of these biases that your borrower reached out to you about.
Yeah, I think so. So first, from the FHFA standpoint, the Biden administration has been focused and very supportive of FHFA and the GSEs to begin the innovation process and throughout the lending space. And I think that it's really the conflux of low inventory, high interest rates, and home affordability decreasing, that has been the impetus behind it. But it's good to see the government first is addressing it, and that's a very positive change. On the desktop appraisal and allowing it to proliferate, I think it's a good thing. I think it does remove a couple of things. It removes some of just the agitation, I'll say, of a human being going through traffic in LA County or San Francisco or Fulton County, Georgia, which is Atlanta, or Miami-Dade, or wherever you're from, and maybe there's that human element that we can reduce the subjectivity to, and as long as there's some subjectivity in it, there's a chance for some bias that we wouldn't like it to have. There's some subjectivity that's condition related, strictly condition related, not about race or color or creed or origin or sexual orientation. That's completely understandable as far as a real property asset is concerned. And I think having the desktop appraisal reduces some of the agitation for the reviewers, the appraisers. It allows them to be in an environment where they can actually use more data at their fingertips. And for example, Voxtur has created 1,000-point check on all the various aspects, an automated QC process on all the different aspects of valuation products, from from your AVM all the way through your appraisal. So we've been at the forefront of really creating data tools and validating each data element to make sure that the value is correct and unbiased when we provide it. So where there's more desktop appraisal opportunity, I think that's going to be nice. It's going to remove agitation. It's going to allow for the appraiser in real time to have access to more data. It's going to allow for more automated QC in flight. So I think all of those things are going to be very beneficial to consumers, especially the those that I said that are at the margin, and that's going to help. We do have in Voxtur, we've got a couple of interesting things that we created. We created an augmented reality app that actually works off of the Sketch, the Apex format, where we ingest an Apex, and we, on top of it, we build a 3D rendition of a home. We do it all locally. We don't send it offshore. We maintain the data, security, integrity. So we've created an augmented reality app that allows even consumers could do that for their own home and get a very accurate floor plan layout, which is at the very basis of the valuation. So we can do that. That eliminates plenty of biases from coming out there and then making determinations about the property. And then the second piece we append to that is that 1,000-point QC check that I said, that's automated, where we're actually going in and validating. We're validating what's been filed with the county records as far as the floor plan or the building permit. We're looking at all that information. We're validating that data. We're validating all the comps. We're looking at the equity analysis because we also have access to all the tax databases. So we're doing a very thorough algorithmic validation of all that data and eliminates the things that shouldn't be considered from the process. So I think, your next step, the next step with GSEs and FHFA were, hey, maybe we'll do a home inspector and we'll do an appraisal, and put that together. And I thought, okay, well, that's injecting two people that might be of the same color and the same age bracket. So I don't know if that's the first one, but from the appraisal standpoint, being at their desk, that's a benefit. And then I think the step after that is using like an augmented reality app, like what Voxtur has, to get an accurate floor plan layout. Now there's no person going to the home. Now you're doing it with an automated methodology. It's validated data. It's geo-fenced. It's real time, and it's immutable, right? And so here it is, this validated input. And then on top of it, you now have a QC check, eliminating any of that other human element out of the equation, but you could still have an appraiser check off on it. And for some properties where there have been multiple purchase or refinance over time in many of the communities where there's a lot of similarities and comps, then I think you can even move beyond the appraiser and maybe reduce that cost from $800 uninsured down to like what we have, which is $100 with an insurance wrapper. And now you have a less risky and less biased product, and the consumer just saved $700 to $800. I think that to me is like where the market should lean to for the majority of homes. And many of these homes, Freddie or Fannie or FHA, they already have the risk, right? They've already underwritten these loans. So why, if we're going to come back, why wouldn't we just further streamline it and reduce the cost to the consumer, allow more consumers to avail themselves of a better rate structure? And then that builds a stronger community, and that means there's less default, and that means there's more opportunity. So that's where I think we should go.
No, absolutely. I mean, probably every single home in the United States has FHA loan or a Fannie loan or a Freddie loan at some point in time, and either you have super large homes with jumbo loan amounts, and we are not talking probably
No,
diversity and inclusion at that price range, or you have new build homes which are much easier to appraise actually, because I mean you have a ton of new data that you can use, and
that's
where
right.
you need very little inspection anyway. I mean you have
Right.
occupancy certificate from the city, all the inspections were done, you have a ton of data that you can use. So very rightly said. Let me jump the topic a little bit from appraisal and move on to title, and that's
Sure.
something interesting happened again with GSEs, and I want
Yeah.
your take on that. I know that I think it was American Housing Alliance, and they have what 75 million members, and they came out endorsing the AOL, which by the way for our audience here stands for Attorney Opinion
Opinion
Letter.
letter. That's correct.
Yes. And GSE said that they will accept that on behalf or in lieu of title insurance. First, walk me
That's
through,
correct.
Jim, the history of title insurance.
Yeah.
I personally actually don't know much about it, so I'm curious
Okay.
myself to hear more about it. Is that how did it come about, and if it does impact diversity and inclusion in any way, and if
Yes.
AOL will actually prove to be at least one element or one step in the positive direction from the minority home ownership perspective. So walk us through the history and where do you see
Sure.
AOL coming in?
So the first 100 years of the country, there was no title insurance. If you were going to
Oh,
transact and you were going to transfer property from one person to another up till I'll say 1876, then you would go to an attorney. An attorney would give you this opinion, and they'd say, okay, here's the opinion. Yes, you do in fact have Shashank has the rights to the property. He can transfer it to Jim. Great. I'd rely on that, and I would do it. I would take the property. So what happened was, at some point, Shashank went to the attorney and said, hey, can you give me an opinion on Jim being able to sell the property? And the attorney said, yes, Jim can sell it. Well, then Shashank gave that letter to Bob and said, okay, well, I'm not going to buy the property, but Bob, here's the letter. And the attorney was wrong. The attorney was inaccurate, incorrect. But since Bob didn't have a direct relationship with the attorney, couldn't sue the attorney for malpractice. So at that point in time, believe it or not, a group of lawyers got together and asked for a charter in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania and the city of Philadelphia for the first title insurance charter. They wanted the ability to write title insurance. Okay. They
okay.
saw that an attorney opinion, if there was no privity of contract, direct relationship with the attorney, then we couldn't sue the attorney for malpractice. They were wrong. We needed a policy to go with the loan or go
Sure.
with the information. So in so doing, First American Title Insurance Company was born, okay, in Pennsylvania. So that's how it came about. So then it was attorneys still doing opinions, and it was a title insurance company beginning to proliferate. They would also do duplicate recordings, keep a title plant, try to maintain accuracy of records. And so the attorneys were more and more marginalized. The attorney opinion became mainly used in commercial deals, like for an office building, you'd use it to say that you're zoned properly, et cetera. And then when the GSEs began to securitize loans, certainly at that point in time, it was pretty much the death knell for most attorney opinion letters, because now loans are being sold in the secondary market. It's got to have a policy that goes with it to cover off a
Absolutely.
title risk, right?
Yep.
So I saw all this happening, and I was building through Voxtur a data ingestion engine. I just happened to be an attorney who's taught real estate law in 2 states. I just happened to be licensed between the Florida Supreme Court bar, the Georgia, and the United States Supreme Court. And I've tried many cases, real estate and other, and I've taught law, and I've done this as a GSE approved or no objection lawyer for about 20 years. So I'm kind of in the space, and I know a little bit about it. So I'm looking at this, and I thought to myself, well, wait a second. Certain states have certain promulgated rates, very high rates, very expensive. And certain other states, even though the rates aren't as expensive, they have high dollar values. For example, like California,
Yeah.
okay, where now your average home price, even GSE loans are at 800,000 or more, right? So very expensive. And I thought to myself, well, wait a second, what if I could create a new type of transactional liability insurance that would go around my opinion for the life of the loan? And
Sure.
so my letter would have all the coverage of an Alta policy, and I'd have this special insurance product to back me up. And because it's legal work, because I'm an attorney and I use attorneys that are licensed in every state. For example, in Florida, where I've been licensed since 1995 and taught real estate law, I can go there and I can create an attorney opinion that covers all the risks of transfer, and I can use the data to do it very efficiently. So I created a whole methodology, a technology for Voxtur where an attorney can log in, validates the attorney, and it walks them through all the underwriting questions very efficiently. So they can be super efficient. And then it can deliver that attorney opinion, which gives you all of the coverage of an Alta policy. And we wrap it with the specialty wrapper. And that's what we worked on with FHFA, with the GSEs. We worked with Fannie and Freddie closely to go through the entire vetting process to provide them the copy of the insurance, the attorney opinion, the opinions on my opinions, believe it or not. Like, if for every lawyer, I didn't lawyer myself, I had another lawyer about me. To gain that acceptance. And on average, we found it saves over $1,000 a transaction. Well,
Wow.
some of the lenders I talked about, they're rich dudes. They don't really get it. They're like, oh, well, why would you? What does another $1,000 mean? I said, well, look, if you're a veteran and you're an enlisted person or you're a first-time home buyer, that $1,000 might be all of your groceries for a few months of the PX. That $1,000 might be, your electric bill. Yep. Like the difference between, maintaining your home and not might be $1,000, and you may not get it because you sit in a home in Newport Beach or in San Francisco or New York City or wherever, or where I'm located, Denver, Colorado. You might not get it, but it's very meaningful for people, right, to save that money. So we work very closely with the GSEs on that side to gain acceptance, to change the seller service and guide to allow for the product. I think it's a huge deal for veterans. I think it's going to be big when the VA comes out and announces it, and we're hopeful that'll be soon. We expect the same thing in FHA to do so as well. It's a tried and true methodology. It predates title insurance, which is so funny. Where there's been some of this attack from certain quarters about it, but it's time honored. It's based on all the information and the data. And it's got a sophisticated attorney doing the reviewer. And despite all of the benefits, it's $1,000 on average less expensive. I think that moves the needle for an FHA loan. I think it moves the needle. In California, the seller pays for title. Yeah. If you're in California, we've already had conversations. As you'd imagine, we've had conversations with the jumbo lenders. We've had conversations, obviously, for Fannie and Freddie loans. To me, the first people in line should be the veterans and the first-time home buyers. Yep. Right. And that's where your diversity and inclusion comes from. And I think they're going to get there now. So I think, knock on wood, that we were about to turn the corner. But just imagine if you took $700 out of an appraisal and you took $1,000 out of title and you put nearly $2,000 of savings to the consumer. How many people were turned down in your portfolio that were veterans who couldn't pass the repay test? How many people, like the client I helped, where money was chewed up, that she could have, if she would have gone through with her loan, that she could have borrowed and had the benefit for her family. That to me is where the rubber meets the road. And so reducing the cost of home ownership using validated data, thinking intelligently about risk allocation and how we can use insurance more efficiently and effectively to help reduce the cost of getting into a home. Those are some of the things that we should be thinking about. That's going to help a more diverse population get in a home and build wealth. And that's what should happen to reduce the wealth gap. And guess what? If you do that and you give them the benefit of that, it's less likely they're going to default. It means more community stabilization. And so I think we should be thinking about it in the broader sense.
We should be, yeah. In last 2 minutes, you kind of summarized everything that diversity and inclusion should be all about. And I mean, if some of the agencies are listening to this, Jim and I talked about the fact that Fannie and Freddie has made definite progress on both appraisal and title, but I think FHA and VA needs to do a lot more work, especially because a lot of minority home ownership do come through those two loan programs and less through Fannie and Freddie. And that's something that still needs to be worked on. But great job on doing everything that you're doing at Voxtur, and really appreciate you coming on the show, because in this last 20-25 minutes, we talked about really a ton of things that can be done to make minority home ownership not just a talk that the industry is doing or the agencies are doing, but actually make it a reality at a much lesser cost, much less bias, and making it faster really in the process, making it more streamlined, making it more easy, and really less intimidating for some of those people to buy. So thank you again for being on the show, Jim. I really appreciate it. Ladies and gentlemen, this was another episode of California MBA's Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion podcast with your host, Shashank Shekhar. And this podcast is sponsored by Prime Lending. I hope to see you again on the next episode. Until then, stay well.
Thank you.